This video contains spoilers for Hiveswap Act 2 and Hiveswap Friendsim. Additionally, this video is not intended for younger audiences, much more so than my Jade Car rewrite. The narration will briefly contain themes that are sexually suggestive in nature in both serious and humorous contexts. That being said, nothing explicit takes place and nothing explicit is shown on screen or graphically described, so the story is not age-gated. But if you are under the age of 18 or this type of content is upsetting to you, please proceed with caution. Additional content warnings are being shown on the screen. Well, my Jade Car video certainly got a lot more attention than I was expecting. I know that 3,000 views isn't a huge number in the grand scheme of YouTube, but while making it, I honestly didn't expect to get more than maybe like 40 views. I had no idea so many people were interested in hearing me talk about Hiveswap for that long. So I want to say thank you to everyone who watched it and left me comments on what they thought. It was really encouraging to me and inspired me to pick back up a scrapped project of a similar nature. That is, the video you're watching now, my Friendsim rewrite. Why exactly I'm doing this is difficult to explain succinctly. A lot of it has to do with personal issues that are hard to talk about, especially to a public audience. I was unable to play Friendsim because the content in it managed to be very specifically tailored to a lot of things that I'm afraid of, to put it lightly. The other characters, and the stories being told may not have been real, but what I've experienced is real, and so was my reaction to being reminded of those things. So, I was never able to play his Friendsim, which was a bummer because I considered all of the other Jade Blood's Friendsims to have knocked it out of the park. My issues with it on a non-personal level are similar to my issues with the Jade Car, that overall the story felt like it was trying too hard to be crass instead of actually saying anything interesting or meaningful about the characters being presented. I wish that I could give a more in-depth analysis of my issues with the original, but it's really not a conversation I'm comfortable having, especially not with strangers on the internet. There are plenty of people who have played it and could have a meaningful discussion about it with you without jeopardizing anyone's mental health, so I'd like to request for that to be done elsewhere. Thanks. I started this project as a short scene I'd written between Lanq and Lanera just as an experiment to flesh out their character dynamics in my head a bit more, in preparation for writing some of the endings for my Jade Car. After I did my Jade Car rewrite, I realized how fun it was for me to make up these stories and share them. And then the Jade Car video was so well received that I decided I could probably do something about messing around with Lanq's Friendsim as well. Since all the stuff in my head about Lanq had been a muddled, vague mess of really complicated feelings, writing this story felt a lot like finally getting closure, like the guy's finally being laid to rest in my head, I guess. My goals and intentions here are pretty similar to the Jade Car video, so I won't spend too much time reiterating them. But for anyone who's a newcomer, I am not a professional writer. I am making these videos as a hobby of mine for fun out of love for the source content. I'm not trying to claim that what I am making is better, I am just making something that's more suited to my own personal taste. This video is not intended as a personal attack against people who like the original version or people who worked on the original version. Well, I think you've humored me long enough on that subject. After all, I'm here to tell you the Jade Blood's tragic backstories, not my own. Also, I made some really good memes about the story, and if I have to keep them to myself for a second longer, I'm going to explode. So without further ado, let's get into the story. You have a feeling you're getting to the end of your adventures here on Alternia. You've had a good run, you've lived, laughed, and even loved, maybe just a tiny bit. Well, okay, a lot. You love all of your new friends, but it feels like perhaps you might be through the friend ringer. How could there possibly be any more trolls for you to befriend, whose lives you can bumble into and somehow improve despite your overwhelming incompetence? You probably won't be finding out today. No, you're not dying, although the heat in your scuttlebuggy makes it feel like that. It's been inching along a sprawling, cracked road through the bone-dry moorland surrounding Outlet for over an hour now. Even with the air conditioning going full blast, the heat from the Alternian sun is simply unforgiving. You wouldn't be putting yourself through Dante's Inferno for no reason, though. Your good friend Bronya summoned you to the Brooding Caverns. It's always nice when a friend reaches out to you first instead of you crawling up from under their floorboards like usual. Bronya had sounded a bit urgent too, so you'd set out right away despite the less than favorable temperature outside. At long last, your vehicle creaks up to the mouth of the caverns, a large, jagged edifice that recedes into the sun-bleached grass as its tunnels wind down deep into the Alternian crust. You park your buggy in the long, late afternoon shadow cast by the rock, and it groans as it settles down onto the hard soil. It feels like opening an oven when you step out onto the grass and quickly duck into the cave. The acrid stench of the alien flora stings your nostrils. It smells like simmering bile under the hot sun. You're glad the inside of the cave alleviates some of the smell and the heat. Your eyes are still adjusting to the drastic change in brightness when you feel a hand on your shoulder. You jump and whirl around, squinting into the darkness. "Oh, I forgot, your weird alien eyes can't see that well in here," comes a soft, familiar voice. It's Bronya. She clicks on a flashlight and you blink a few times, once again stunned by a sudden change in lighting level. She's the same as you ever remember her, tall and strong, but unmistakably kind and welcoming, too. You inquire as to why she summoned you here so urgently, and her expression quickly darkens. Rubbing at her forehead exasperatedly, she explains. "It's two of my Jades. They just aren't getting along, and I swear I'm at my wit's end." Bronya sighs, the light from the flashlight casting deep shadows on her face, making her look much older than she is. "I'll explain it while we walk. It's still a bit of a trek before we reach the hive." You bound to keep up with Bronya. She's clearly got a lot on her mind because she's taking long, anxious strides, threatening to leave you behind. You ask her what the big deal is about two of her Jades not getting along. Aren't they all like little kids? Can't you just put them in a timeout or something? Bronya chuckles wryly. "I wish it were that simple. No, unfortunately, it's not simple, wigglerish, petty bickering this time. Well, it is wigglerish bickering, but it's between Lanera and Lanq. Lanera will do anything I say, but Lanq takes any request from me as a challenge." Bronya exhales heavily. You recognize the first name. Lanera is Bronya's second-in-command. You've met and befriended her before. You think fondly back to when she had you tied up and threatened at knife point. You're unfamiliar with the second friend, however. That's not surprising. Lanq tries not to be around much when he's not working, against my best wishes. He wants very little to do with Lanera and I, and even less to do with anyone we consider a friend. Yet somehow he always manages to get Lanera spinning into a frenzy. I don't know how he does it in so little time, Bronya muses. You think to yourself that it is honestly not that difficult to get Lanera worked up. You ask Bronya why she needs your help. I know Lanq won't listen to anything I have to say. He's... Bronya pauses for a moment, carefully searching for the right words. The independent type. Another independent Jade blood comes to mind. "No, he's not much like Daria," Bronya exclaims. "Well, superficially, maybe they're both a bit surly, but he's much more well-guarded, and clever, and a little bit malicious." You hear a strange, un-Bronya-like tone creeping into her voice. Is it contempt? Before you can question it, the two of you have come up under the presence of the Jade Blood Hive. It's immense, much larger than a majority of hives on the surface, but despite its size, you know how crowded it is. Bronya fishes around in her skirt pocket for her keys. "So here's what I'm proposing. Lanq has today and tomorrow off. I overheard from Elward that he's going to be at a special location in Outla tonight with some of his friends. Lanera's got tomorrow off as well, the first time they've both had the same day off in almost half a sweep. I need you to take Lanera there and see if you can get the two to talk," she explains quickly. You are a bit apprehensive at first. You want to help Bronya, of course, she's your friend, but Lanera's your friend too. It sounds like she and Lanq don't really get along. You'd hate to ruin one of her precious few days off. And even though you don't know Lanq, you don't want to ruin his good time with his friends either. Trust me, this will be for the good of both of them. Bronya sounds a bit strained, like she might also be doing this for her own sanity as well. And if you don't find Lanq, well, you and Lanera will just have a fun outing together on the surface. You still aren't totally on board, but Bronya's already unlocking the door and calling out to Lanera. Lanera's not far off. You can hear her clattering around in the kitchen. Soon enough, she pokes her head through the doorframe, squinting at you and Bronya. Her hands are busy with wiping the lens of her glasses. "Bronya, is that you?" Lanera asks, straining her eyes at her fellow Jade blood. "Yes, it's me. When you're done cleaning your glasses, mind if I have a word with you?" Bronya's tone is light and casual, but Lanera still tenses up at the request. She quickly finishes with her glasses, putting them back onto her face and blinking a few times. She stuffs the cleaning cloth away in a pocket in her skirt. She then notices you standing next to Bronya, and her expression seems to relax even the slightest bit. "Why have they come back? Has one of the Jades snuck out again?" "I have been keeping watch all afternoon, and I swear, I haven't seen a single—" Lanera begins talking quickly, but Bronya cuts her off. "No, I've got a very special task for the two of you," Bronya says. "It's Lanq's day off, and I can't get him to do anything, or he'll throw a fit. Daria's been complaining about their arm again, and we don't have a corrective brace that fits them. Lanera, could you and our friend here take the buggy into town and find one at Crawl Screams?" Her insides feel squirmy at the lie, but Bronya's facade is bulletproof. Lanera nods energetically and disappears to retrieve her purse from her respite block. As soon as she's gone from the room, Bronya grabs you by the shoulders and speaks quickly and quietly. The Crawl Screams is right across the street from a roller rink. This is where Lanque will be with his friends. I've always kept a change of clothes in the buggy. Tell Lanera to put those on once you get there, and whatever you do, don't tell her or Lanque that this was my idea. You nod furiously, nervous at the idea of trying to convince Lanera to do something. She'll obey Bronya's every command, but when it comes to anybody else, she's quite headstrong. After a scuttlebuggy ride made much more bearable by the fact that the sun has gone down, you and Lanera pull into a parking lot in front of the Crawl Screams, and you can see the roller rink across the street. Lanera starts to get out, and your stomach flips over as you tell her to stop. She looks at you, more curious than incredulous. You point at the roller rink across the street and say that it looks like a lot of fun. Lanera raises an eyebrow, unamused. Bronya sent us here on a very simple mission. We cannot get distracted by such immature drivel, she says with conviction. You again suggest it. You say that Lanera has tomorrow off and she's been working really hard. She deserves to do something fun. You silently pray she can't hear your voice wavering. I'm not dressed for that. Now come along. We've got to get back to the caverns as soon as possible. Point out that Bronya keeps a change of clothes in the car. She probably wouldn't mind Lanera borrowing them. Lanera gives you a long, scrutinizing gaze. Has she seen through to your ruse? But to your relief, she slowly relents, sighing deeply. I don't know what it is, but you always get me into the most ridiculous situations. But against my best wishes, for some reason, I feel like I should do this. So, all right. She keeps you fixed in her fiery amber gaze. Don't make me regret it. You nod excitedly and hop out of the buggy to let her change into the casual clothes Bronya left for her, anxiously bouncing on your heels as you wait. The outfit doesn't fit Lanera very well. She looks fine, of course, but her normal clothes covered her up so much you had no idea how scrawny she really was, and the wide neckline of Bronya's t-shirt keeps sliding off over her shoulder. Lanera's fussing with it anxiously, but you think it has a cute 1980s vibe to it. Not that that statement would mean anything to a troll, though. Before Lanera can have second thoughts, you grab her by the hand and start tugging her across the street, gently shoving her through the door to the roller rink. Within the building is a singular large, low-light room with a short wall surrounding the actual skate floor. Past the skate rental desk, there's a snack bar, a lounge, several benches, and a gold-blood DJ in a raised booth playing loud, energetic music for the skaters. Once you've stepped inside, you're glad Malik lent you a tank top as well as his hoodie. You've been to a few roller rinks back home, and it always gets sweaty. Lanera stands next to you, wringing her hands out nervously. I don't know if this is a good idea. This shirt doesn't fit me very well, and I've never skated before. Maybe we should just go home. Lanera's voice is shaky, unlike the fiery, incredulous confidence she normally has. You nudge her gently forward towards the rental desk. A bored-looking olive-blood cashier is sitting behind it, chewing bubblegum and scrolling through their palm husk. They don't look up when you stand on your tiptoes to reach the tall desk, and as you begin to ask for skates, you realize that you don't know how troll shoe sizes work. Biting your lip, you turn to Lanera. We'll have a size 18, Lanera begins nervously. She then studies you for a few moments before continuing. And a Wiggler's size 3. Her voice wavers slightly, but she gets a boost in confidence when the olive blood doesn't question her. They simply mumble something and get up, disappearing into a closet to look for the skates. You give Lanera a gentle thumbs up and she smiles weakly. The olive blood brings back the skates. They begin to say something along the lines of, "Here you go, miss," when they finally get a good look at Lanera. They stare at her for a moment, fixated on the jade symbol on her shirt. Then they begin to look slowly, curiously, over to the skate floor. You follow their gaze, and you spot the Jade Blood boy, who must be Lanque. You suddenly realize that the cashier is probably making the same connection as you, so before they can say anything, you blurt out a quick thank you, take the skates, and you shove Lanera over to the lounge area. The two of you sit down on a bench and start putting on your skates. The pair Lanera picked for you is a little big, but hers seem to fit just fine. You ask Lanera if she's ever skated before. No, that's why I don't understand why you're so insistent on coming here. We really shouldn't be doing this. She starts to get to her feet, incredibly wobbly. You're no roller skating expert or a person with any semblance of upper body strength, but you offer her your hand anyways. That's the great thing about roller skates. If you go down, you go down together. As you and Lanera step onto the skate floor, you quickly scan the area for Lanque. You spot him over near a corner doing some spinny jumps for a group of trolls who must be the friends Bronya mentioned. Hey, you recognize some of them. You know you can't lead Lanera straight over to Lanque, though, then she would immediately know you're up to something. And to be honest, Lanque looks pretty intimidating. You're fine futzing around with Lanera for a bit until she runs into him on her own. Now that I'm out here, I suppose this isn't too terrible. Lanera has let go of your hand and she's scooting forward on her own in small, jerky movements. In the short, you notice how much of her height is from legs. She looks a bit like a baby deer trying to walk across ice. It's pretty cute. You glide up next to her, surprised at how well you remember how to skate. You tell her the key is long, smooth leg movements, not small, shaky ones. So it's about confidence, then. Lanera's brow furrows. Though your tone was friendly, you can see fire creeping back into her eyes. That's what I am. I'm confident. Did you think I wasn't? Do you think I'm a coward? You quickly reassure her that you think she's very confident. You were just giving her some pointers on skating, that's all. You extend your hand to her again, and for a moment she hesitates, and you fear she'll bristle at you again, but she takes it. I'm sorry. I'm just nervous, that's all, Lanera says. The two of you come to a stop and look into each other's eyes. As you do, the music changes to something upbeat and fast-paced. Really puts a groove in your step. You give Lanera another smile, and then begin leading her through the motions of skating. It's a little awkward because of how much taller than you Lanera is, but she's a fast learner. Pretty soon, you're having the time of your life skating with Lanera, and you almost forget the reason you're here. Almost. You and Lanera had gotten so wrapped up in your dance that you'd careened right into another skater, and the three of you topple over into an uncomfortable mass of limbs. It's not great. Not the worst dog pile you've ever been in, but it's a little bit too sweaty for your liking. Groaning a bit, you begin to apologize to the strangers you roll off of them, but they explode at you. And just what the hell do you think you're doing? The angry voice pries at you. You rub your ass and you realize, uh-oh. Somehow the two of you skated right into none other than Lanque himself. This doesn't bode well for first impressions. Lanque looks from you to Lanera, who is scrambling to get up in her skates, and then back at you. His piercing, sulfur-colored eyes narrow dangerously, his lips pulling back ever so slightly to bare his fangs. For a moment, you're worried he might attack you. Bronya made it seem as though he was more catty than violent, but with trolls you never know. Thankfully, he cools his gaze. Ugh, Lanera, I thought I told you not to bother me when we're not in the caverns. Lanque scrunches up his nose as he talks to her, as if she smells foul. You kind of want to punch him in the face, but you promised Bronya you'd help these two get along. How hard could it be? Lanque? What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in the caverns. Lanera sputters defensively, finally getting back on her feet. I'm getting a root canal, Lanque rolls his eyes. What the fuck does it look like I'm doing? Yeesh. I honestly ought to call Bronya right now and tell her you're playing hooky again. Lanera whips out her palm husk and starts typing furiously with her knuckles. At the mention of Bronya, Lanque's face twinges oddly, and he reaches out and slaps the palm husk out of Lanera's hand. It goes clattering loudly to the floor, calling the attention of many nearby skaters. How dare you! Lanera shrieks. Bronya doesn't need to know where I am. She's not my fucking Lucis, and neither are you, Lanque spits angrily. Lanque Bombix, you are just the worst. How a matron as loving and competent as Bronya got stuck with a wretch like you is beyond me. You think you can just come here and skate? It's a fucking roller rink! If anyone wasn't staring at you before, they all definitely are now. Even the DJ is trying to pretend like they're not watching you over their laptop. You're about to interject when another skater comes gliding up behind you. It must be one of Lanque's friends. Hey, Lanky, what's Stretch here doing outside the caverns? It's Elward. Crossing your fingers, you hope she's willing to help you de-escalate. Lanque is clearly miffed at her use of nicknames, but she's unbothered by his anger. Well, if she knows what's good for her, she'll go running back to Bronya with her tail between her legs like she always does, and not bother me again. Lanque's getting worked up, his hair bristling and a low growl rumbling in his throat. Listen, man, it's funny as fuck to watch the two of you go at it, but like, we all just want to skate. You're kind of killing the vibe. Elward moves to casually but firmly put herself between Lanera and Lanque. Why don't the two of you just, like, simmer down and go do something more productive with your time than tearing at each other's chug columns? Are you serious? An ashen solicitation? Now? Lanera says to Elward. At this comment, Lanque goes bright green and Elward bursts out laughing. For the last time, Lanera, I do not have collisionist feelings for you, Lanque shouts at the top of his voice. This is going badly. The other trolls in the rink are slowly edging closer and closer, no longer able to hide their interest in this conflict. You suddenly realize that if you want to save this sinking ship, you have to do it now and do it fast. You see two possible options here. You can ask Elward for help, or you can take it outside. At first, you decide to tug on Elward's shirt to get her attention silently. Your eyes dart between her and the two arguing Jade Bloods. Elward stares at you for a moment, the gears in her head turning. Then she catches on and nods at you. Come on, what's that thing Bronya always says? Don't bring drama from up top down below? Elward reasons. Well, how about, for tonight, we just don't bring drama from down below up top? How does that sound? Like Lanera's ever had anything going on down below, Lonk retorts under his breath, rolling his eyes. Lanera gasps and Elward catches him in the back of the head with a sharp whack. What did I just say, genius? She crosses her arms at Lonk as he rubs between his horns. You're being awfully conciliatory tonight, Elward. What's your game? Lanera questions the cerulean blood. You gulp, hoping Elward can keep her cool better than you. Same as always, she's just trying to spread the legs of any girl she sees, Lonk smirks, making Lanera flush bright green. But if it's you she wants, she might need a crowbar. It's called trying to have a nice night out with my friends, dipshit, Elward bares her fangs at Lonk. Though it's unsurprising neither of you have ever heard of that concept. And just why are you so interested in having a good time? Lanera pries further, sheepishly backing away from Elward, who seems genuinely confused by the question. Most people want to have a good time when they do things? How am I even supposed to answer that? Elward replies. Please, Elward, try and keep your hands out of Lanera's shorts. This is probably the first extracurricular conversation she's had with someone besides Bronya in 3 sweeps. Cut the poor socially stunted weirdo a little slack. Besides, the only hand she'd want down there is Bronya's. I'm sure you can relate. Lonk scoffs smugly in both Lanera and Elward's direction. You're not a fan of how Lonk is treating them right now. You don't want to take sides in this fight, but making fun of Lanera's social skills just seems a little bit low. And isn't Elward supposed to be his friend? She gave him an embarrassing nickname, sure, but in return he's accusing her of creeping on Lanera. I haven't been doing jack shit, asshole, Elward huffs. Am I just not allowed to talk to girls now? You've got a lot of fucking nerve accusing me of being loose when I see how you eye up Malik at least once an hour. Can we stop talking about this? Lanera blurts out suddenly. She's hunched forward and trembling a bit, clutching at her stomach, her face still green and sweat beading on her forehead. You reach out and put a reassuring hand on her arm. She flinches but doesn't recoil. Oh, wow, cry me a fucking river. Little wiggler Lanera can't handle the real world. Lonk's tone is sharp and cruel and he laughs at her. You're about to speak up, but Elward beats you to the punch. Cut it out, man. This is low, even for you. She's giving Lonk an expression of genuine disgust. We don't have to talk about this anymore if it's upsetting you, Lanera. You notice that despite the reassurance, she doesn't try and touch Lanera or get closer to her. You can tell that what Lonk said is still on her mind, and you feel a twinge of discomfort. It's not often Elward's genuinely shaken by something. Ugh, you two are such killjoys. Lonk dramatically rolls his eyes. He's got a defensive tone to his voice, as if he was surprised Elward didn't join him in teasing Lanera. Well, teasing doesn't really seem like the right word. When Elward called them Lonky and Stretch, that was teasing. What Lonk's doing right now is more like bullying. Lonk turns heel and skates away briskly. When he reaches the edge of the rink, he kicks his skates off and stomps angrily through a group of young Bronzebloods in the lounge area. You feel like you should follow him because you don't want to let the friend opportunity slip through your fingers. But to be honest, after seeing how he talks to his friends, you're fine to let him go. You see two possible options here. You can ask Elward for help, or you can take it outside. Nervously, you suggest getting some fresh air. Both Lonk and Lanera are still angry, teeth bared and hair bristling, but they allow you to usher them out of the rink and into the fresh air. Elward follows but hangs back by a few feet, curious about how the conflict will end. The two Jade Bloods' furious amber gazes are locked until Lonk turns dismissively and says, "Whoa, you know, you're not that well versed in troll vernacular." But you can tell he just threw an absolutely vile insert at Lanera. From his venomous tone to Lanera's gasp to Elward wrinkling her nose, you can tell he's gone too far. Before you can think of what to do next, Lanera lashes out like a snake. Her fist connects with Lonk's jaw hard, filling the empty street with a dull thud. Lonk stumbles back and falls ungracefully onto his ass. You feel a twinge of catharsis as he sits up and rubs his forearm along his snout, smudging his lipstick and leaving behind a trail of deep jade-green blood. The silence on the street is deafening. Lanera slowly looks between her own still-clenched fist and Lonk slumped on the ground, her eyes wide with disbelief at her own brash action.
Woo! Fuck yeah, Lanera! Mollywop his ass concave! Elwood yells out suddenly, her voice full of excitement. This seems to snap Lonk back to his senses. His face contorts in fury, and he flexes his hands, razor-sharp crimson claws unsheathing from the previously blunt nail beds. He jumps up and comes back swinging at Lanera, but she nimbly dances out of his reach, and all Lonk can manage is a tear in her sweater vest. You can tell Lonk's not nearly as practiced in a scrap as Lanera is. Lonk's unused momentum causes him to stumble forward, and Lanera grips him firmly by the arm. She swings him around, redirecting his weight and slamming him hard into the outside of the roller rink building. You hear a pained grunt as Lonk has the wind knocked out of him by the concrete wall. The trickle of blood from his nostril thickens to a dark green, viscous flow. Lanera has him pinned to the wall by the neck, her other arm raised to strike again. Lonk thrashes wildly but is unable to break free. However, Lanera does not attack. She simply looks down in shame, unable to meet Lonk's eyes. This is what you were always telling Grania about, weren't you? Her expression is unreadable. You told her I was dangerous, and despite my best efforts, it seems you were correct. She lets Lonk go, and he slumps to the ground, all the fight gone from his body. He coughs roughly, hacking up an unpleasant spatter of blood onto the cracked pavement. You can see dark green bruises starting to form on his neck. He looks really, really pathetic, and you find it a bit repulsive. Lanera brings a clawed hand to her face, and you notice that she's crying. Worried, you quickly gesture Elwood back inside. Lanera can be volatile when she's this upset. Despite being shooed away, Elwood watches closely from behind the front window of the roller rink. All I want is to fit in with you and the rest of the Jades. Lanera's wavering voice breaks the silence. And you make it so hard. It seems that no matter what I do, you always find something new to mock me for. You've made my life nothing but a parade of shame and misery. I'm the laughingstock of the caverns, thanks to you. You make it so hard to be happy. She takes a deep, uneven breath, fighting to get the last words out before she breaks. Why, Lonk? Why do you hate me so much? Lonk coughs again, weaker this time. He's holding his head at an odd angle, and his amber eyes seem cloudy and unfocused. How can your life be full of misery and shame when you've gotten everything you ever wanted? The sharpness of his voice surprises you. You joined the cloisters. You became Branya's second in command. She showers you in praise every day. You're having your life handed to you. His breathing is weak and ragged, his shoulders heaving with the effort. Do you have any idea what I had to give up to be where I am now? Lanera says, a furious hiss rising in her throat. Do you have any idea what I had to give up? Lonk spits back. Another silence falls over the street, punctuated only by the rattle of Lonk's labored coughs and wheezes. The facade has seemed to drop entirely from Lonk's voice. You've never had to sacrifice anything. You do whatever you want all day. The rest of us pick up the slack when you're out here acting like a sleazy degenerate with no respect for anybody but yourself, Lanera tears into him. That's what you think. That's what I know. Lanera takes deep breaths that quiver with fury. She glares at Lonk, her fist clenched, her hair bristling. You might humiliate me every day of my life. You might make me afraid of what I see in the mirror. You might make me feel like I'll never be happy again. Lanera's words surge out of her with a purpose. But at least I'm there for Branya when she needs me. At least I'm doing some good in this world. I'm helping the other Jades. And what are you doing when the rest of us are out here chipping our horns and dulling our claws? Off who knows where, doing vile things in the dark without a single concern for anyone but yourself. Lonk furrows his brow, weakly but angrily. He attempts a scoff but comes up coughing again. Lanera definitely hit him against the wall too hard. He might have a concussion. Good lord, how will you explain this to Branya? You really think you're doing any good for the Jade Bloods? Lonk challenges. I know I am. I'm doing more than you could ever hope, Lanera responds. I'm there for Branya when you're not. You're there for Branya. Lonk huffs. Aren't we all? What's that supposed to mean? Lanera demands. Branya's got more inside than you could ever know. Lonk's voice began to tang with bitterness. Soon enough she'll finish chewing on you and then she'll spit you out. You think Lonk might be going woozy from the blow to his head, but he keeps talking. Just like she did to me. Lanera stares at him in quiet disbelief. That's not possible. You've never cared for any troll but yourself, she exclaims. No, Lanera. Lonk's eyes shift out of focus again and he stares off into the middle distance, his voice becoming softer. I did care for another troll. Many sweeps ago. And it was the biggest mistake I've ever made. There's a new undertone to Lonk's voice, one you haven't heard from him at all since meeting him. Regret, grief, and bitter contempt. Not the superficial, performative kind you'd seen from him earlier, but the genuine, rough and ugly kind that comes from deep within. When Lanera is unable to respond, he fills the void himself. She was my best friend, and I was hers. Everything we did, everywhere we went, everything we had, we shared all of it. We were inseparable. Like family, you think to yourself. I shouldered her burdens. I carried the weight of all her mistakes. And when she had just inherited leadership and drowned all her troubles in whiskey every day of the week, I was the one picking up the slack for her. I gave her everything I had, but it was never enough. I was never enough. His eyes sharpen, and he uses all of his energy to glare at Lanera, fury in his eyes and venom in his voice. But you were, and I'll never forgive you for that. That's not fair. Before I moved to the caverns, I didn't even know you existed, Lanera says defensively. Even in his subdued state, Long seems genuinely taken aback by this information. She never told you about me? Long asks. No, not once, Lanera says. I knew her for almost 2 sweeps before moving to the caverns, and I didn't know who you were until you started making my life miserable. You could have said something, Long hisses back defensively. I shouldn't have to justify my existence to you, Lanera makes an exasperated gesture with her hands. Long suddenly groans and sways dangerously on his knees. Lanera at first seems to think he's groaning at her in annoyance, and you see her tense up, but Long falls over with a dull thud, his eyes going cloudy and unfocused. Lanera freezes, taking deep, unsteady breath, her eyes wide in fear. She starts taking steps back, and you realize she's about to make a run for it. In the split moment, you're faced with a decision. You can choose to make sure Long's okay, or you can choose to stop Lanera from running away.
Choice 1. Make sure Long's okay. You rush over to Long's side and kneel down. He looks bad. He's still bleeding from his nose and now his mouth, and his head and neck are laying at an awkward angle. You look up to Lanera and she bolts, and you can hear muffled sobs of anguish as she disappears down the street. You're hit with a stab of worry, but you think Long probably needs more urgent attention right now. A bell jingles behind you as Elward emerges from the roller rink. Holy shit, did she kill him? Elward asks. She sounds a little too blasé about it for your taste, but when you meet her eyes, she realizes how upset you must look. We should probably, get him back to the caverns, Elward says awkwardly, averting her gaze. You nod in agreement and make an attempt to lift Long, having very little success. Elward puts her arms around Long's body and hoists him up onto her shoulders in a fireman's carry. You try the door on Jade's scuttle buggy, but it's locked. Shit, Lanera definitely has the keys. If Lanera's got the key, then I bet she'll be able to get home just fine. I parked my buggy down the street, Elward reassures you. I'll have to tell the other guys to find a ride home with someone else, though. You follow her back across the street and down the sidewalk, away from the direction Lanera ran off in, arriving at a small parking lot sandwiched between 2 tall buildings. Shifting Long's weight over onto a single shoulder, Elward fishes around in her pocket and then pulls out a set of keys with 2 tiny fuzzy dice hanging from it, one jade and one cerulean. She clicks a button on them and the highlight of a pickup truck halfway down the row lights up. You run to the truck and pull the door open, allowing Elward to slide Long over the seats and into the back row, buckling him in. His head hangs to the side awkwardly, and you opt to sit in the back next to him to hold his head up in a natural position. Elward quickly climbs into the driver's seat and slams the door shut, driving wildly down the streets of Outglut. When you arrive at the Brooding Caverns for the second time, there's no hesitation as you and Elward hoist Long's unconscious form out of the buggy and into the cave mouth. As Elward situates his weight back onto her shoulders, her face lights up. "Hey, he's still alive," she exclaims, feeling tenderly at his wrist with her hand. You do the same. His skin is cold and clammy, but you can feel a faint pulse. Optimism surges in your throat. You'd been too preoccupied with holding his head up during the ride back to check if he was still alive. You definitely could have checked, you just wouldn't know what to do if he was actually dead. It's a relief that you won't have to be breaking that news to Bronya. Oh god, Bronya. When you and Elward finally scramble down to the Jade Hive, she's standing outside the building, anxiously typing on her phone. When she notices you and Elward, at first she looks confused. Her confusion turns to horror and then rage when she sees Long's body and realizes that Lanera isn't with you. "What did you do?" Bronya roars at Elward, hurrying to take Long from her. Elward tries to begin sputtering an explanation, but Bronya is preoccupied with getting Long inside. She practically kicks the door down, rushing inside and impatiently shooing several very small jade bloods off the couch so she has room to lay him down. "You think I did this?" Elward is saying, following after Bronya. Bronya is running her hands through her bristling hair harshly, desperately trying to smooth it back down. You interject meekly and Bronya rounds on you, just barely containing a snarl. You attempt to explain what happened. You want me to believe? You're trying to tell me that Lanera, of all people, did this? Bronya demands. We both watched it happen, Elward puts an apprehensive hand on Bronya's arm. Locke kind of provoked her, though. He said to her, well, he said... Elward quietly repeats what Locke had said to Lanera, and Bronya cringes deeply. I only ever thought he said things like that to me, Bronya says quietly. You and Elward both blink at her in surprise. You let him talk to you like that? Elward asks. It doesn't bother me, Bronya says, not meeting her eyes. If I'd known he was treating Lanera as badly as he treats me... She starts to tear up. A small groan emits from Locke's body. The three of you snap around to watch with bated breath as Locke slowly rolls onto his side. Bronya lets out a gasp of relief. He's alive? Bronya exclaims. God, yes, of course he's alive, Elward says. Don't you think I'd be a little more nervous if I was bringing him to you dead? Ignoring Elward's snark, Bronya rushes over to Locke and slowly lifts him. She nods at you and Elward to follow her down a hallway, and she opens the door to a familiar room, her Wiggler nursery. She quickly but gently moves several Wigglers over to the next slime pool and then starts unzipping Locke's jacket. Oh, come on, do you have to strip him? Elward groans. The thirst traps he posts on Pincer Spam are more of him than I'd ever care to see. Bronya flashes her a stern look. The slime may not be able to properly soak into the injuries if it has to go through his clothes as well. Bronya pauses for a moment, biting her lip. At least, I think so. Lanera is usually the one who takes care of serious injuries. The slime helps developing Wigglers, but I don't know how much good it'll do for injuries in an adolescent troll. Elward is still looking squirmy, though, so Bronya turns to you. You nod at Elward, letting her know it's fine to leave, and she hurries out. Once you and Bronya get the job done, you lift Locke in tandem and lower him into the pool of slime. Bronya pushes him down so his head is fully submerged. It's a little unnerving because it kind of looks like she's trying to drown him. You remind yourself that the slime is supposed to be helpful for trolls, so you trust that Bronya's doing the right thing. You and Bronya sit beside the pool for probably half an hour before Locke stirs. Bronya snaps to attention, watching him intently. He tries to sit up but winces. Oh no, don't try and sit up. Bronya pushes him back down and puts a slime-filled pillow behind his head, propping him up against the rim of the slime pool. Locke looks back and forth between you and Bronya dazedly. Bronya, Locke says weakly. Yes? There's a nervous edge to Bronya's voice. Are those... my pants? He's pointing at his clothes strewn in a pile near the door. The slime wouldn't work if you were wearing them, Bronya responds. Did you at least make Elward leave? Locke begins trying weakly to lift his hands out of the slime and wiggle his fingers. His arms are very shaky, but he's definitely more alive than he was an hour ago, which bodes well for the sci-fi magic alien slime. She didn't want to stay, Bronya says curtly, but if you're well enough to talk, you're well enough to explain to me just what happened between you and Lanera. It's none of your fucking business, Locke tries to hiss, but he coughs and retches, a slow trickle of blood coming from his nose again. Well, considering that you almost died and Lanera is nowhere to be found, I think it is about to become my business. Bronya narrows her eyes at him. Well, considering that I almost died, I think you can afford to can it for a minute. Locke rubs at his temples. My think pan hurts like someone's been cracking eggs on it. Locke, stay with me here, Bronya begins. Do you know where Lanera went? Ugh, as usual, she's all you care about. Locke rolls his eyes. And I suppose I stripped you and put you in a bath of healing slime because I want you to just fucking keel over already then. Bronya spits at him and then again smooths down her bristling hair, inhaling deeply. Locke, just answer the question. Where did Lanera go? You mean she's not here? Locke seems genuinely surprised. Yes, Locke. It's getting stressful to listen to Bronya. She's clenching her fists like she could snap a 2x4 in half with them. Lanera is missing. Our friend here says she ran off after fighting with you. Where did she go? Why should I know? The fucking freak beat me unconscious before she ran off, Locke cuffs. So she did do this to you, Bronya says quietly. I thought it was kind of fucking obvious. I tried to warn you so many times about her, and you wouldn't listen to me. Not that that's surprising to anybody. Locke rolls his eyes. Lanera isn't dangerous, Bronya defends her second in command. You were horrible to her, and from what I'm gathering, it isn't the first time. Guilt flashes through Locke's face, but he quickly hides it. Bronya sighs and stands up. I'm going to take Elward and go look for Lanera, Bronya says nervously. Will you be okay here with him? She nods at you. You assure her that you'll do your very best until she can find Lanera and help with the first aid. Bronya looks away doubtfully, closing the door slowly behind her. It's been a month since you and Elward dragged Locke back down to the caverns. In fact, it might have been longer. You're not entirely sure. In the brooding caverns, the days melt together. Without the sun rising and setting, you never have any idea what time of day it is. The passage of time is marked by Branya opening the door of the nursery to check on you and Lanque, you getting up to bring him food and things like that. The longer you spend down here, the more you realize why so many of the Jade Bloods sneak out. Today will hopefully be different, though. Lanque insisted he's finally strong enough to be out and about and won't be confined to the nursery anymore. This morning, you're helping Lanque out of the pool and into a wheelchair. At least, it feels like it's morning. Again, by the nature of the caverns, you don't really know what time of day it is. You push him out of the nursery and down the hall to the Jade Hive's living room. Elward is sitting on the couch, her face looking sunken and tired. Branya is stationed next to the couch attentively, another Jade Blood you don't recognize standing next to her. They're short compared to Branya, with curly hair pulled back into a ponytail and squarish shoulders. They're wearing a white lab coat and carrying a small duffel bag. "Who are you?" Lanque challenges the stranger. He's been sounding a lot better lately, but he doesn't have the confidence and sneer in his voice that he used to have. "Dr. Avosi," the Jade Blood says curtly. "Forgive me for intruding. Your matron summoned me to do an examination. How long has it been since you were injured?" They pull some sci-fi doctor tools out of their bag, and Lanque bristles at the sight of the sharp objects. "It's been almost a wipe," Branya says. Catching your confused look, Avosi explains. "It is unusual for a Jade Blood doctor to take a hive call. Typically, surface Jade Bloods do not get to practice medicine on a living troll until we are on the front lines in combat." They snap on a pair of rubber gloves and pull a surgical mask over their face. "In fact, personal medical examinations are quite rare among trolls. The kind of specialized attention I can give would normally be reserved only for elderly or sick Violet Bloods. But it's nice to find kindred spirits." They rummage around in their bag and come out with a small, flat screen attached to a handheld device. They flip it on and begin running the handheld portion over Lanque's neck and shoulders. As Avosi works on Lanque, he eavesdrops on the conversation between Elward and Branya. "You still haven't found Lanera? I swear, if I'd seen her, I would have told you right away." "Thank you, Elward," Branya sniffs, dipping her head to bump it lightly against Elward's. "Thank you for being here for me. I love you." You guess there's a silver lining to all of this. Elward's been spending a lot more time in the caverns, and she and Branya seem to have patched things up. Branya looks more haggard and gaunt than you've ever seen her, though, like she'll collapse at any moment from the stress. Avosi has finished examining Lanque and is putting their equipment back in their bag, flicking their tufted tail nervously. "Well, I'll start with the best news," Avosi says, adjusting their goggles. "He will walk again, if he wishes to. It will take time, though. I'd advise not trying it for another few weeks at least." "Is there bad news?" Branya asks nervously. "It's not bad news, no. At least, I'd consider it good news when a troll is able to walk away from an accident of this severity, no matter how long it takes. I know my fellow Jade Bloods can understand that sentiment." They nod at Branya. "But he will need a mobility aid. There's significant damage to his femur and the base of his spine. His metamorphosis may fix this, but from what I can tell, that is still several sweeps off. It is imperative you find him a forefront cane in the meantime so he can adequately support his own weight. I can tell you've done your best, but when it comes to serious injuries, soap or slime can only go so far in helping them heal." You find yourself feeling elated that Lanque is going to be okay, but you notice that he looks a bit nervous. "You mean I might not ever go back to how I was before I got hurt?" Lanque asks. "No, you will not," Avosi responds. Lanque looks crestfallen as Avosi finishes packing their bag. They notice his reaction and continue speaking. "This may make your future more difficult, but your life is not over. Before you, I had only ever examined cadavers. My job reminds me, quite often, how deeply death invades every aspect of life on Alternia," they muse. "Us surface Jade Bloods are not used to being surrounded by so much new life. We usually see the other end of it. I may not know you very well, but I'm grateful that you're still alive." Avosi finishes packing their bag. "I know it was a long journey for you. Are you sure you don't want to stay longer?" Branya asks them. I would hate to intrude. Besides, I have much to do in preparation for my final exams and a few wipes. This was most certainly a trip to remember, though. It was an honor to be invited to the caverns. I have never been permitted to interact with other Jade Bloods so closely before." "Thank you." They bow their head awkwardly but respectfully to the four of you and quickly disappear from the hive, closing the door behind them. Lanque is looking at his feet, and Branya and Elward are watching him carefully. "That's what Lanera was going to be before she joined us," Lanque says simply. The sudden mention of Lanera catches you off guard. Has he been thinking about her this whole time? Branya seems a little bit shocked as well, blinking in surprise before she can think of an answer. She never took to it like she took to being cloistered, Bronya responds. If she were here, she might have known what to do about your injuries. You feel a pang of guilt, thinking back to how you chose Lanque over Lanera. Had you chosen differently, would Lanera still be here? Lanque seems to be following a similar thought trail. I guess I never considered what happened to her, Lanque says miserably. I only thought about myself. He hangs his head. It's such a marked difference to how he was when you first met him. He's been acting like a real pain in the ass for the last few weeks as well, bossing you and Bronya around, but you aren't seeing any of that now. You put a reassuring hand on his shoulder, but you know there's not much you can do at this point. You'd been sticking around hoping you could help fix things. You're glad you at least helped Lanque when he needed it, but you don't think bringing him meals or helping him into his wheelchair will do much to assuage his guilt over Lanera. All you can do is hope. You hope that wherever Lanera is, she's happier than she was in the caverns.
Lanque suddenly groans and sways dangerously on his knees. Lanera at first seems to think he's groaning at her in annoyance, and you see her tense up, but Lanque falls over with a dull thud, his eyes going cloudy and unfocused. Lanera freezes, taking deep, unsteady breaths, her eyes wide in fear. She starts taking steps back, and you realize she's about to make a run for it. In the split moment, you're faced with a decision. Lanera is taking tentative steps back, away from Lanque's unconscious form. When she turns to bolt, you reach out and grab her by the wrist. She meets your gaze with tearful eyes. "You have to let me go," she exclaims hysterically. "I can't ever go back. Not after this." She's hyperventilating wildly, choking out uneven sobs, her entire frame trembling. You let go of her wrist and give her a reassuring pat on the arm. As you're doing so, Elward slowly slides out of the roller rink. She walks over to Lanque's body and crouches down, observing it curiously. "Is he, she asks, as Lanque groans and shifts over a bit, still unconscious. Lanera breathes out heavily. She looks like she might pass out. "He's still alive," Lanera says, and then realizes that you and Elward are looking at her. She quickly turns away, wiping the tears from her face. "Lanera, can't you help him?" Elward asks, nudging her foot against Lanque's unconscious form as she talks. You're a bit confused by the suggestion. Lanera always seemed more like the type to make people more injured, not less injured. I don't know. Lanera bites her lip. But you used to be one of those Jade Blood doctors, are they called? Didn't you? I think I remember Bronya telling me that. Elward scratches her head. My training was so long ago, and I never completed it. Lanera pauses for a moment and sighs. I'm probably his best chance for survival, though. There's no other surface Jade Bloods in all of Outglood. She moves to pick up Lanque, but Elward's already on it, hoisting him up over her shoulder. The three of you cross the street and Lanera unlocks the Jade Blood's buggy, opting to sit in the back with Lanque to begin assessing his injuries, as Elward drives you out into the moorlands where the caverns are located. Looking to fill the silence, you ask Lanera if it's true she used to be a doctor. You thought all Jade Bloods had to be nuns? Well, yes, that is the fate of all cloistered Jade Bloods. They are sent to exile because they have no combat training and are useless in the ever-expanding Alternian Empire. She steals an uneasy glance at Lanque, and you think about how easily Lanera curb-stomped him. As you heard me say earlier, I was not cloister-born like the others. I used to live here, in Outglood, training to be a medical expert, like all other surface Jade Bloods. Surface Jade Bloods are quite few and far between. The cloistered Jade Bloods outnumber them, almost 10 to 1. Back in my days of training, I recall being told that the nearest surface Jade Blood besides myself was hundreds of miles away. I wonder if they've been exiled or not by now. She trails off, looking wistfully out the window. Everything about Jade Bloods is so strange, Elward says. No offense, she quickly adds on while Lanera gives her a stern look. It's like, usually when trolls get hurt, we kinda just have to deal with it. Some High Bloods have medicalizers, but either you figure it out or you don't. You think back to the beginning of your adventure when you'd stuck your broken arm into a magic hole in the wall in young Amisha Erden's apartment. It honestly feels like it was an eternity ago at this point. You add on that, it feels like you haven't seen a single doctor's office or hospital since arriving here. We didn't work with any living trolls, Lanera responds. I spent most of my childhood inspecting and dissecting cadavers. She wrinkles up her nose a bit. Had I completed my training, I would have either worked on the front lines of battle or been a live-in attendant for some elderly Violet Blood deep in the reaches of space. Either way, I probably would have never met another Jade Blood if Bronya hadn't arranged for my transfer to the cloisters. You realize that Elward's pulling the scuttlebuggy up to the cave mouth. She slowly brings it to a halt, gripping the wheel uncertainly. Hey, Lanera, can we switch? I've never driven the buggy in the cave before, Elward says nervously. Lanera blinks at her in surprise and then looks at Lonk, who she has been holding up in a sitting position for the whole buggy ride. Of course, but you'll need to support Lonk's think pan and chug column like this, she shows Elward. Two of them exit the buggy and switch positions, and Lanera begins the precarious journey into the caverns. Luckily, the buggy reaches the Jade Hive without hiccup. Lanera anxiously hops out of the driver's seat, making sure Elward knows how to carry Lonk without hurting him further. Wringing her hands out nervously, Lanera reaches for the doorknob. I hope that coming back here wasn't a huge mistake. She looks at you pointedly before opening the door. The three of you enter the large, high-roofed living room of the Jade Hive. Several young Jade Bloods are on the couch, watching what looks to be an educational cartoon, and Lanera bristles at them, shooing them off the couch and shutting the TV off. You two stay here with him, Lanera says. I have to fetch some supplies from my block. Before she leaves, she takes a couch cushion and props up Lonk's head to a more natural angle. While Lanera is gone, Lonk groans and rolls over again. You're glad he's still alive, but you really hope Lanera knows her stuff. While Lanera's gone, you hear a heavy set of footsteps approaching the living room. You and Elward look at each other nervously, the exact same thought running through your heads. What on Alternia? Bronya exclaims loudly, standing in the doorway to the living room. She's in her pajamas, her hair tied up, holding a mug of coffee. She's staring straight at Lonk, the bruises on his neck clear and dark, dried blood caked on his face, his legs sticking out at a strange angle. She then turns to the two of you, her eyes harshly demanding an explanation. You see Lanera come down the stairs at the end of the hall, clutching a small bag. She lays eyes on Bronya, who is facing away from her, and her eyes go wide, and she tries to turn around and sneak back up the stairs. The floorboards on the first stair creak, and Bronya's head snaps around, fixing Lanera in her gaze. Lanera? Is that your old medical equipment? Bronya gasps. I can explain, Lanera says nervously. You don't need to, Bronya responds. What did these two do to Lonk? Bronya gestures at you and Elward, who gasps indignantly. Before you or Elward can defend yourselves, though, Lanera speaks up. It was my fault. Her voice wavers. Not theirs. Bronya simply looks at Lanera wordlessly, blinking slowly. She then tries to shimmy past Bronya to get to the couch, but Bronya puts a hand on Lanera's shoulder, and Lanera immediately tenses up. What do you mean, it's your fault? Bronya asks. Lanera looks down at the floor. He said, Lanera begins, struggling to come up with how to explain it. The fucking bitch attacked me, Lonk's groggy voice suddenly says behind you. He's not looking too well, but his eyes are open and he's weakly glaring at Lanera. You were kind of being a grade A bone bulge for the entire night before that, Elward comes to Lanera's defense. He said to Lanera. Elward leans into Bronya's ear and quietly repeats Lonk's insult from earlier. After getting over her initial shock, Bronya groans and massages her fingers through her hair. I swear to the Dolorosa, the two of you are going to drive me shit-hive maggots. Her tone is exasperated. Lonk, why would you say that to Lanera? I told her not to fucking bother me when I was out with my friends, Lonk hisses, and yet she decided to come to the same roller rink I was at and skate right into me in front of everyone. It wasn't my idea to go skating, Lanera defends herself. It was theirs. I was just running an errand for Bronya. She points at you, and both Lonk and Elward look at you, their expressions seeming to wonder if you knew they were there. You turn to Bronya frantically. She avoids your gaze, rubbing at her temples. Lanera, at least attend to his injuries while we talk, please, Bronya says with a dangerously even tone of voice. Lanera meekly obliges, approaching Lonk with the small bag she retrieved from her block. I don't want you anywhere near me, Lonk recoils away from Lanera, but sharp pains in his neck send him back to his original position, propped up against the pillow. I promise, Lonk, I am not going to hurt you again, Lanera pleads with him. She then reaches into her bag and starts pulling out several sharp doctor tools. She's clearly rummaging around for something else, but Lonk bristles and jumps back again, yelping in pain when he aggravates his injuries. Why do you have a bunch of knives, then? He demands, scrambling weakly to get away from her. They're not knives, Lanera says as calmly as she can. These are medical tools. If you cooperate with me, I won't need any of the sharp ones. Are you threatening me? Lonk spits. No, I am not. Lanera continues, keeping her voice as calm as she can, but she's struggling. If you let me treat your injuries now, I can heal them without the need of surgery. Lonk, please listen to her, Bronya says softly. She is your best chance for survival. I wouldn't need a best chance for survival if she hadn't attacked me, Lonk exclaims. What makes her so qualified to take care of me anyways? She's a doctor, you dumb cunt, Elward says to Lonk. A doctor? Lonk asks, confused. You find yourself almost chuckling at him. Does he really not know what a doctor is?
Before Lanera was admitted to the cloisters, she was training to be a medical professional, Branya says to Long. She knows what she's doing. Lanera nods nervously and then takes an old and wrinkled pad of paper out of the bag and starts scribbling on it wildly. After a few minutes, she hands the paper to Elward. If Branya trusts you with the buggy, and you're confident that you can get there, Lanera begins nervously, could you get these things from the store? I'll need them to attend to Lunk. Elward looks over the list. An extra small shoulder brace? Will that fit him? She scratches her head. That's for Daria. I was supposed to pick it up before this entire mess started, Lanera sighs. Elward nods in understanding and Lanera hands her the buggy keys. Elward ducks out of the door, closing it behind her. Despite Lanera's attempts to gain his trust, Long still won't let her anywhere near him. Whenever she tries, he flexes his claws and swipes at her. He's still weak and shaky, though, so it's unlikely he'd hurt Lanera if any of his blows connected. Lonk, please cooperate with Lanera, Branya says. I know that after what happened, you don't want her getting near you, but I wouldn't want her getting near me regardless, Lonk scoffs. I wouldn't want to catch her social disease. Lanera growls indignantly. Fine then, but this is your own choice, Branya says ominously before the two of them can bicker again. She steps forward and leans over where Lonk is laying on the couch. She grabs his wrists and pins them down towards either side of his head. What the fuck? Lonk shrieks and he starts thrashing his torso and legs around wildly, his upper body effectively pinned in place. I told the both of you, don't fucking touch me. Just cooperate for 10 minutes and I wouldn't have to do this, Branya breathes back at him angrily. Branya turns to you and then nods her head towards Long's flailing legs. You rush over to the side of the couch and attempt to pin down Long's legs, but he's stronger than you expected. Clearly not as strong as Branya or Lanera, but they're aliens with weird alien superpowers and you're just a flimsy human with no upper body strength. He catches you with a sharp kick to the jaw and your vision momentarily goes starry. You fall flat on your back, groaning in pain. Long, for fuck's sake! You hear scrabbling, scuffling, and lots of snarling and yelping as your vision goes dark near the edges. You get back up, still a little dazed, and try again to get a hold on Long's legs. This time you and Branya manage to effectively pin him down, but it's taking all of your weight as Long strains against you. Lanera approaches him with a small handheld device. She has to whack it a few times to get it to turn on, but once it's working, she starts running it over several spots on Long's body, pressing it firmly against his skin. Why are you touching me? Long demands. He stopped thrashing and frozen up, still incredibly tense. I'm taking x-rays, Lanera says. She's calm on the surface, but you can hear a lot of tension and nerves under her voice. The device shows me what's happening to your endoskeleton, so I can see where you're hurt. When Lanera pulls the device away to check the readings, Long relaxes a bit. He seems to trust her a little bit more now that she'd done something without hurting him. Lanera furrows her brow, squinting to read the device's tiny screen. What is it? Long asks nervously. What did you do to me? Nothing that won't heal, Lanera begins carefully, if you cooperate with me. But I don't want to cooperate with you, Long says. I hate you. I'm not keen on you either, in case you didn't notice, Lanera snaps back. But I would rather help you than just let you die or be injured for the rest of your life. Will you be able to help him? Branya asks. She looks at Lanera with a piercing gaze. Yes, he has damage to his chug column, ribs, spine, and femur. I know what to do for his chug column, ribs, and femur on my own, but I will need assistance with his spine, Lanera says nervously, shrinking a bit under Branya's harsh gaze. It could have lifelong complications if I do not get assistance as soon as possible. I will need to contact a Jade Blood from the surface, who has completed more training than I have. You, Branya, and Lonk all raise your eyebrows questioningly at her. Didn't she say earlier that surface Jade Bloods are really rare? Yes, normally it would be a tall task, Lanera says, but I believe I still have the contact information with my medical gear. I had looked into contacting other surface Jade Bloods shortly before I met Branya. I never went through with it, though, so we just have to hope that I got my information right. The doorknob jiggles and Elward re-enters the hive, holding a small bag. I hope I got all the right stuff, Elward says as she hands the bag to Lanera. Never been in that section of the store before. Lanera fishes around in the bag and takes out a large bottle of bright red liquid. She grips it and inhales sharply, then turns to Lonk. Lonk, I know this will be scary for you, but I need your cooperation on this now more than ever, she says. I am going to contact another Jade Blood, and they will be able to help heal your spine. The spine is a very dangerous part of the body to mess with. I did not learn much about it before my studies were terminated. You notice Lanera's voice has gone a bit softer than normal. You've heard her use this tone of voice before a few times, usually when she was comforting Wanshi. Well, what do you need my cooperation with? Lonk asks. He's considerably calmer now, but still showing a bit of trepidation. This liquid is a medicine that will ease your pain, but it is very strong, Lanera ventures. It must be taken by injection, and it will make you... She pauses for a moment, searching for the right word. fuzzy. Elwood seems to catch her drift. Oh, like those little guys we sometimes take on Saturdays, Elwood explains to Lonk, who nods in understanding. Lanera gasps, clutching at her chest in shock. You shouldn't be taking this substance recreationally, she sputters at the two of them. Bronya narrows her eyes at the both of them disapprovingly and nods lightly in agreement. That's not the point right now, Elwood attempts to pacify Lanera and Bronya. After a moment of silence, Lanera smooths down her hair with difficulty. No, you're right. What matters most right now is helping Lonk, Lanera says. She then turns back to Lonk. I won't administer it without your permission. There are medications that can be taken painlessly, but they will not work as well on injuries as severe as yours. Lonk considers this for a moment and then agrees. I want Elwood to give me the shot, though, he says, narrowing his eyes at Lanera and Bronya. Dude, really? Elwood asks him. I don't want either of them near me with a sharp object. He then jerks his thumb at you, and they don't have the coordination to do it. Elwood rolls her eyes, but agrees. Lanera prepares the syringe and gives it to Elwood. She rolls up Lonk's sleeve and gives him the shot. He makes a yelping sound and rubs at his shoulder for a moment. Did it work? Because I don't feel anything. Lonk's eyes go hazy and he slumps over. Elwood simply watches him sway, but Bronya jumps forward and catches him, supporting his neck. I'm going to attempt to contact the surface jade blood now, Lanera says, taking out her palm husk. The screen cracked from when Lonk knocked it out of her hand earlier. Bronya suddenly bristles in alarm and snatches Lanera's palm husk from her. You, Lanera, and Elwood all look at Bronya curiously. Why don't the three of you take Lonk to soak? I can make the call. There's a strange urgency to her voice, but none of you question her. Lanera and Elwood carry Lonk between them down the hall to Bronya's nursery. Did either of you think that was kinda weird? Elwood asks. Bronya can do what she wants, Lanera says simply, tacitly avoiding taking a stance on the matter. You nod to agree with Lanera, and Elwood grumbles as the three of you enter the nursery, clearing out a pool and laying down Lonk in the slime. I don't think we should put him in with his clothes still on, Lanera says nervously. Well, do you want to strip him? Elwood asks sarcastically. Lanera wrinkles her nose in response. Then they both turn to you, and you shake your head no as well. Elwood shrugs. Alright, guess it's Bronya's job then, since she was so eager to take the phone call instead. She snickers a bit, folding her hands behind her head as the three of you trudge back out to the living room. It suddenly hits you how tired you are. Bronya's not in the room, but you can hear her voice faintly. Hopefully she got through to someone, you think to yourself. The three of you sit down on the couch, and the tiredness tugs at you, and you kind of pass out for a bit. When you wake up, you're not sure at first how much time has passed. A sharp knock at the door is what rouses you from your sleep. In your grogginess, you trudge over to the door, bleary-eyed, and pull it open. There's a jade blood standing outside, but not one you've ever seen around the cloisters before. How could someone have found their way all the way out here and through the caverns? How many kids does Bronya have here again anyways? But, come to think of it, this one doesn't look much like a kid. They seem about Bronya's age. You think you'd remember this one, too. They're decently tall, wearing a white lab coat and big goggles, and their tufted tails flicking nervously as they stare down at you in surprise. Are you Bronya Ursama? They ask slowly. You shake your head no, and you hear a low rumbling sound behind you. You turn to see Bronya getting up from the chair and stretching. She glances over Lanera and Elwood for a brief moment, who have fallen asleep on the couch. Lanera's leaned on Elwood's shoulder. That would be me, Bronya says, stifling a yawn. You seem busy. The stranger adjusts their goggles. Shall I come back at a later date? Oh, it's you, Bronya says, finally getting a good look at them. No, please come in, Dr. Avosi. We weren't expecting you so soon. After I hung up last night, I hopped on the quickest express train to Outglut, they say energetically. I simply could not risk letting this opportunity pass me by. Their conversation is interrupted by a dull banging at the nursery door down the hall, followed by yelling. Bronya, get me out of this fucking ablution trap for wigglers. There's another dull thud afterwards. It sounds like Long's throwing stuff at the door to get Bronya's attention. Speaking of opportunities, that would be him now, Bronya says flatly. Should I fetch him for you? I think it would be easier if I could see him in the block, Orvosi says thoughtfully. His injuries are fresh. It'd be best if he doesn't move. Bronya squirms uncomfortably in her spot. You'd put Lonk in her nursery because it was the closest ablution trap you could find. You forgot that she doesn't like it when anyone besides her goes in that room. I suppose so, Bronya begins carefully, though I must warn you, there are wigglers in there, and... When Bronya says wigglers, Orvosi's face lights up. Bronya! Lonk yells again. We'll be there in a minute, Bronya yells back, exasperated. You mean there are live wigglers in that room? Orvosi asks. Yes, Bronya responds, but Orvosi has already begun scooting their way down the hallway. When you and Bronya catch up with them, they're already in the nursery, completely ignoring Lonk, crouched down over a tiny gold blood wiggler, cooing at it in delight. "Who's this whack job?" Lanque asks Bronya angrily, gesturing at Orvosi. "And why don't they know how to knock?" "That is Dr. Orvosi," Bronya says, leaning down to pick up a wiggler who had been trying to escape through the door that Orvosi left ajar. "They're here to look at your injuries." "I thought Lanera was going to do that?" Lanque asks. "I don't want any more weirdos putting their fronds on me today." "Lanera," Orvosi repeats quietly. Bronya purses her lips anxiously, watching Orvosi like a hawk. "How curious." They linger on it for a moment, and then pull over the small duffel bag they brought to the hive and start unloading several alien-looking medical apparati. "Yeesh, were doctor tools on Earth this spiky?" "Where does it hurt?" they ask, approaching Lanque crouching down next to the slime pool. Here, here, and here," Lanque says, pointing to various places on his body. "Any reason why you're in the slime fully clothed?" Orvosi asks, in what appears to be roller disco attire. "It's a long story," Lanque says. Dr. Orvosi leans back on their heels. "I'm not going anywhere," they say politely. Strangely enough, you don't detect any sarcasm in their voice. Neither does Lanque. "Oh, so you're like her," Lanque observes, rolling his eyes. "For your information, it means I don't want to talk about it." "It would help me to know what happened." They reach out awkwardly to pat Lanque's arm. "I swore an oath of secrecy to your matron." Lanque looks at Bronya suspiciously, but she refuses to return his gaze. "Lanera attacked me," Lanque says. "She hit me in the jaw hard. Then she grabbed me by the neck and slammed me into a building. It hurts like a bitch." Orvosi raises an eyebrow. "How old is Lanera?" Orvosi prods further. "That's a weird question," Lanque says simply. Orvosi dips their head and apologizes and doesn't broach the subject again. They're looking over Lanque with a handheld device that looks like a portable x-ray machine, running it over his neck and chest. It looks like a shinier, newer version of the tool Lanera had used earlier. Our consultant said the worst damage is to his spine," Bronya interjects. Orvosi turns their head to look at Bronya, staring intently through their goggles. Lanque leans forward, Bronya supporting his head and neck, to allow Orvosi to run the device over his lower back, studying the image on the screen closely. "I can fix this," they say simply. "It's good you managed to contact me so quickly after he was injured. Much longer and he may have not been able to properly heal. Though, it is curious you were able to find me so easily. I wasn't aware the cloisters kept tabs on surface jade bloods as well." "We don't. Lanera had your palm husk number in her weird medicine duffel bag," Lanque says nonchalantly. Orvosi furrows their brow. "Might I be able to meet this Lanera?" they ask. The doorknob jiggles and Lanera stumbles in. "Oh great, she was eavesdropping," Lanque says. "Isn't spying on Bronya enough?" Orvosi is staring at Lanera in shock. So, it's not a common name," they mumble quietly. "Dr. Orvosi, I don't believe we've met," Lanera says, extending her hand nervously. "I'm Lanera Scalby." Orvosi merely looks down at Lanera's hand, then back up at her face, abhorrent. "You're alive?" is all Orvosi can manage to say. Lanera blinks in surprise, and before she can respond, Bronya interrupts. "Dr. Orvosi, I believe Lanque needs your attention," she says. "What do you mean, alive?" Lanque asks. You're from the surface. You have to be." Orvosi is stuttering, pointing at Lanera in shock. "I've seen you before." Yes," Lanera says, confused. "I transferred here a few sweeps ago." "No!" Orvosi exclaims. "That's not possible. You died." You and the other 3 Jadebloods simply stare at them in silence. "See, I told you. Whack job," Lanque says. "Lanera didn't die. How could she be standing right in front of you?" "Is she a ghost? But we're not Rustbloods," Orvosi continues. "A rainbow drinker? I thought the science on them was dubious." "It is," Bronya says simply. You notice Lanque is glaring at her. Lanera is still alive. "But she died. We, the Surface Jadebloods, we heard all about it. From the heiress herself. They showed us her body," Orvosi sputters. "A world without Lanera," Lanque sighs wistfully. "Oh, if only." "Bronya, you did get my transfer approved," Lanera asks nervously. "Right?" Bronya doesn't meet Lanera's eyes. Lanera looks helplessly between Orvosi and Bronya. "Bronya?" Lanera asks again. "She faked your death," Lanque says, putting the dots together. He's staring at Bronya angrily. "You what?" Lanera shrieks at Bronya. She quickly puts her hands over her mouth. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to shout at you," she adds on. She's trembling, the other hand clutching her stomach. You pull over a chair from the side of the nursery for her to sit on. I think you can yell at her, says Long simply. Since when do you care? Lanera asks bitterly. Then she groans and leans forward, resting her head on her knees. Long turns his gaze to Branya. Why didn't you tell her? He demands. I didn't think it was that important, Branya responds weakly. Are you fucking insane? Long can't help but laugh a bit as he asks Branya. He comes up coughing again, clutching at his injured chest. Did you tell anyone? Why would I? Branya asks. If I may interrupt, Orvosi tries to interject, but you nudge them to be silent for the time being. You both stand there, flies on the wall to the shit show that's evidently about to unfold. I think Lanera has the right to know if she's legally dead, Long says to Branya. Branya bites her lip and looks at the floor. You know, this is why I can't fucking stand you, Branya. You can't just keep secrets like this. The last bit comes out more emotional than you've ever heard from Long. At least I'm keeping secrets for a good reason, Branya defends herself. I only want to help. Lanera and all of my Jades. Long laughs coldly. You think you're helping anyone? He challenges Branya with the same question he asked Lanera. Lanera would have never agreed to move in if I had told her the truth, Branya says. But then it would have been her choice. All she does for you, and you won't even offer her the option to have agency over her own life. Long, Lanera says. Long turns to look at her angrily. I didn't know you cared. Of course you didn't, he scoffs. You don't know jack shit if it isn't about being a freaky pervert towards Branya or treating everyone else like maggots. Long, that's hurtful, Branya chides him. Good, Long spits back. You're not my fucking Lucis, so don't talk to me like I'm still a wiggler, and you're not the boss of Lanera's life, or Daria's, or Wanshi's. I never said I was, Branya responds. Well, you sure fucking act like it, Long snarls, baring his fangs angrily. I thought you hated Lanera, Branya says to him. Why do you care so much all of a sudden? I hate you too, dipshit, and everyone else in these dumb fucking cloisters. Long throws his hands up, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. Lanera sucks, but at least the half of it comes from incompetence. You're just vile, Branya. You're revolting. How Lanera or anyone at all can stand you, it's a fucking mystery to me. Branya doesn't defend herself. She stays quiet. Long turns to look at Lanera. He gazes at her for a long, long time. Lanera looks away, squirming uncomfortably from the eye contact. Long, Orvosi interjects nervously. I would like to take a closer look at your ribs, if you don't mind. Long huffs angrily as Orvosi continues inspecting his injuries. There's a long, tense silence, marked only by the soft noises made by Orvosi's medical device. Why didn't you tell anyone? Lanera is the first to finally speak. Why didn't you tell me? I don't know, is all Branya can manage. Why didn't you tell Long that you were... Lanera gets choked up, that we were seeing each other all those sweeps ago? Branya doesn't respond. Were you ashamed of me? Lanera pushes further. No, Branya says. Not at all. Never. You're my best friend, Lanera, and I love you. How could you do this to me? Lanera wails in anguish. How could you let me live a lie for so long? She starts crying, putting her face back in her hands, her body shuddering with unpleasant sobs. Branya looks between Lanera and Long, and you watch her take in how miserable they are. How miserable she's made them. Not so fun, is it? Long asks her, now that your actions finally have consequences. Branya rounds on him. You think I was ever having fun? She hisses. Do you think my job is easy? She gazes around the nursery at all the wigglers milling about, having to decide who lives and who dies, having the fate of so many resting on my shoulders alone, having to cut my own stipends in half so Lanera can stay here. Get over yourself, Long says. Anyone could have done your job. Then why didn't you? Branya demands. They offered it to you, too. I passed on it because I thought you'd pick me, Long says. I thought things would be the same as they always were. We would do everything together, just like our whole lives before that point. So all this time you've just been jealous of Lanera, Branya says, disgusted. Don't flatter yourself, Long says. Any desire I had to be close to you died out a long time ago. I'm just repaying Lanera the favor. That's still not fair, Branya says. I let you treat me badly because I know that on some level I deserve it, she gulps. But you can't continue to punish Lanera for what I did. Why not? If it makes the both of you feel like shit, I don't see any downsides. Branya is about to respond, but Lanera, who has stopped crying, interrupts. Long, I'm sorry. She turns to Branya. I'm sorry to you as well. I didn't realize I had been causing you so much trouble all this time. I think I should leave the caverns. She gets choked up at the end. No, Lanera, that's not what I meant. Branya quickly tries to reassure her. I know that I can't change what I did, and if leaving is what you really think is best, I won't stop you. Branya reaches out to Lanera, taking her hands. But I want you to know that what I did was done out of love. I didn't want to leave you alone to be cold. Believe me, I tried my best to get your transfer approved. I would have done it the proper way if I could. All of these sweeps, yes, it's been hard work, but for you, it's worth it. Lanera looks up from her lap at Branya, hope flickering briefly in her eyes. But how can I stay? If maiming one of my fellow Jades wasn't bad enough, she trails off. My entire existence, it goes against the Jade blood code. I shouldn't be here at all. That's why I could never fit in. No, Lanera, Lanque says. It's my fault. All this time I really thought you were just as bad as Branya. I didn't expect that she was stringing you along just like she did to me. That's your problem, Lanque, Branya says. You've never done anything out of love. You can't understand what it's like. That's not true, Lanque exclaims, but his face is full of doubt. Well, Lanera says, turning her gaze to you as she speaks. Like a good friend once told me, it's never too late to try and be a better person. He raises an eyebrow at her. I guess, knowing what I do now, Lanque begins, I do feel kind of bad for how I've been treating you. You shouldn't be treating anyone like that, says Branya. Lanque groans. Orvosi finally finishes their examinations and starts rummaging around in their bag. They've been dead silent for a while now, drinking in the conflict, just like you have been. You can't blame them. When it rains, it pours with the Jade Bloods. Orvosi, Branya exclaims, suddenly realizing that they'd been there the whole time. I'm sorry you had to see all that. Nonsense. It was fascinating. They adjust their goggles. I've not witnessed anything like this in all of my life, even when I traveled to the capital city for my rites of maturation. Other surface Jade Bloods really are quite dull. They rummage in their bag again and pull out a pad of paper and start writing down instructions. The good news is that Lanque will be able to make a full recovery since we are treating his injuries quickly. Lanque and Lanera both look relieved at this, and you can't help but exhale as well. I'm going to have the medication delivered to you. It is quite strong, though, so you should take it easy for a few weeks. You will also need a cast for your chug column, shoulder, back, and strut pod. I've written the specific time frame for these down here. Lanera, I trust that you are familiar with casts? Lanera scrambles to her feet and wipes at her nose. Of course! She takes the paper and looks over it, nodding in understanding. Lanque, you may still occasionally have pain where the injuries occurred, even after they heal. If that happens, ice can help, Orvosi adds on. We have a machine for that, Lanera says. It's mine. I could show you how to use it if you'd like. She turns to Lanque sheepishly. So I'm going to have old codger bones like Lanera now? Lanque groans. It happens to everyone eventually, responds Orvosi. They nod at the other Jade Bloods. I'll be showing myself out now. Thank you very much for having me. And Lanera, they turn to her. I'd love to stay in touch. Call me again if you need help with Lanque. They bow awkwardly and shuffle out of the room. As they leave, Branya turns to Lanera. Lanera, I want you to know that you have always been welcome here, she begins. And you will always be welcome here. Forever, Lanera sniffs. I love the life I've built here, she says. I've dedicated everything to the Jade Blood mission. How can I reconcile that with what you've told me today? How can I continue to be a loyal Jade Blood if my very existence goes against the code we live for? You've always been a loyal Jade Blood, Branya says. It doesn't matter what the rules say. Lanera gasps. Yeah, the Jade Blood code kind of blows, Lanque adds on. You can second that. You don't even live here and you can always tell there's some new bullshit going on. You can't talk like that. It's insubordination, Lanera exclaims. Think of the Wigglers. I'd continue to care for Wigglers even if the Jade Blood code was abolished tomorrow evening, Branya says. I don't do it because I want to follow the rules. She gestures at the nursery around her. I do it because it's what I love. I didn't love it at first, but I learned to. Your enthusiasm is what helped me, Lanera. You helped me discover my true calling. You belong here not because of anything arbitrary like color of your blood or the laws fabricated by the Empress, but because you're an irreplaceable member of our group, and we all love you. Lanera tears up again, but this time she has a wobbly smile. I don't know if I'd say love, Lanque begins, but Branya flashes him a look and he cuts himself off. Then he turns to you. You're a really weird-looking alien with less social skills than Lanera, but thank you for getting us into this mess. He speaks weirdly, like this is a way he isn't used to talking. You sheepishly admit that it was all Branya's idea. Lanera gasps, but Lanque looks unsurprised. I figured as much, he shrugs. Still, it was pretty brave of you to stick around even after Lanera snapped. Or pretty stupid. Maybe a little bit of both. You beam with pride at his praise. Will you stay, Lanera? Branya asks again. Lanera thinks for a long time. I know my life will never really be the same after this. I don't know if I can forgive you for keeping a secret like that from me. And the same goes for Lanque and how he's treated me, she begins. But I'm willing to try. Regardless of what the Jade Blood Code tells me, I will always love living here and helping others. I'll try to be nicer, I guess, Long says, to both of you. Don't invite me to bingo night, though, because I'm not interested. Will you two hug it out for me? Bronya asks. Lanera nods. Don't push your luck, Long growls. He pauses for a moment, looking at Bronya's pleading face. Ugh, fine. Come here, Lanera. The two of them embrace in a hug that's awkward for a multitude of reasons. Lonk being in a slime tub with an injured neck definitely isn't helping. Bronya claps happily at the sight of them reconciling. When they're hugging, the door creaks open and Elward stands in the doorway, rubbing her neck. Hey Bronya, the ice machine is empty, she begins, but trails off when she sees Lanera and Lonk hugging. Did I miss something? Lonk quickly jumps away from Lanera. He bristles at Elward, who is smirking. Not a word, he hisses at her. So are you two, like, friends now? No, the both of them say in unison. Maybe someday, though, Lonk says. You feel your heart swell, knowing that not only did you make a new friend today, you helped two other trolls back onto the path to delectable friendship. And that's the end. I tried a little bit of a different approach with this one than I did with the Jade Car. I decided to go with writing fully fleshed out prose instead of the bullet point style summary from the other video for a few reasons. First being that Friendsim is a visual novel, so its narration and story is much more linearly structured than Hiveswap's. The other being that the story was more lightweight and had less branching choices than the Jade Car, so I figured I'd have more time to dwell on each part of the story. And then I recorded everything, and it was like an hour and a half long, which was the same length as the Jade Car's narration, so I kind of played myself. After people seemed to like so much what I did with Lonk and the Jade Car, I decided I should make a sequel video of sorts about his Friendsim. I'm relatively pleased with the story I came up with, along with getting to explore my headcanons about Jade Bloods. I wanted to better showcase Lonk's relationships with the two other older Jade Bloods, and how their whole situation is just kind of really messed up. All three of them have done bad things to each other, with varying levels of severity, of course. Especially with Bronya, I wanted to emphasize how her job is not a role suitable for someone her age. She's tired and anxious all the time from constantly having to care for everybody around her. Yes, the three of them are the older Jade Bloods, but they're still barely adults. Bronya and Lonk are 19, having hatched from the same clutch, and Lanera is about a half-sweep younger than them at 18. Bronya's been taking care of all the other Jade Bloods since she was 13, and there's a reason why she was so young, but, you know, story for another day. Bronya's not a mother figure to the younger Jade Bloods. She's more of an older sister desperately trying to fill in for an absent mother. She's not old enough to have the emotional intelligence to take care of so many people. I think that she resents Lonk for getting to have his teen years to himself, while she had to take up all of the responsibilities that could have been Lonk's if he'd accepted the job. Lonk never could have really survived in Bronya's position, though, for a number of reasons. In the end, it's hard for me to really pin the blame on a singular one of any of these three characters. They're all angry, hurt, and bitter. The true root cause of their problems is the system they live in, not their bad blood with each other. But to an angry teenager, that's not a very satisfying answer, so they continually take their frustrations out on each other and refuse to get any better. This was only my second time making a video like this. I'm still not entirely sure on my narration style, and I can already think of a few nitpicks I have. I didn't know how far to lean into doing character voices, so I feel like my narration might have been a bit flat, and also the characters yelled a lot in this story, and it felt kind of silly to listen back and hear myself talking at a normal volume and then following it with "the character yelled." But I have two roommates who I would like to spare the experience of hearing me yell Homestuck words at my computer over and over again until I get the lines right. I also noticed that with the prose style in narration, it may be confusing sometimes which character is talking. This wasn't an issue I had in my Jade Car video since it wasn't full prose. So I was saying he said, she said before every line of dialogue. This time, there wasn't always a clear indication that a new character had started talking until like halfway through the sentence sometimes, because you couldn't see the story written down like how I was reading from it. If I decide to do more videos with this style in the future, I'll definitely be adjusting my writing style to accommodate for that. But I think overall, working on this video, just like with my Jade Car, was a learning experience. And like with my last video, I want to genuinely thank anybody who has listened this long. Once again, the video was much longer than I intended for it to be, but it was a lot of fun to work on, and I really enjoyed getting to explore these characters again. But let me know what you thought of my take on these characters in the comments, because I'm a new channel, and getting comments helps me with the magic YouTube algorithm, I guess. I never script the end of my videos. I really should start doing that because I always forget what I want to say. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. Thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you have a nice day. I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.